The emergency room was very busy. There were lots of voices, beeping machines, and people walking fast under the bright lights. Nina Hayes, who had worked as a nurse for a long time, was reading patient charts at the nurse's station when the automatic doors opened. She quickly looked up, and her heart sank when she saw a small girl, about 7 years old, come in. The girl was holding a worn-out doll in one hand, and her other arm was hanging limply by her side, showing purple bruises on her pale skin. Her blonde hair was messy, and her dress was dirty, with tears on her cheeks. "Help, my grandma isn't moving," the girl cried, her voice shaky with fear. Nina immediately dropped what she was doing and rushed to the girl. She kneeled down so she was at the girl's level and said gently, "Sweetheart, you're safe now. What's your name?" "Lily," the girl whispered, her voice barely heard above the noise of the ER. "Hi, Lily. I'm Nina. Can you tell me what happened to your grandma?" Nina asked. Lily's lip quivered as she tried to explain. "I tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't move. There were loud noises, and I hid under the table." She hugged her doll tightly, her knuckles turning white. Nina felt sad but stayed calm. "What kind of noises, Lily?" "Yelling and things breaking," Lily said softly. Nina felt worried, but she kept her voice steady. She spoke into her radio. "We need paramedics right away. There's one unconscious adult, possible assault, and bruising. Sending them to this address." Lily flinched at the word assault, but Nina gently touched her shoulder and said, "The paramedics are on their way. They'll help your grandma, and we'll make sure she's okay. Can you stay with me and help?" Lily nodded, but she looked around scared. Nina guided her to a quieter part of the ER, away from the other patients. "You're very brave, Lily. You did the right thing by coming here," Nina said, trying to comfort her. Lily asked, "Will she be okay?" "The doctors will do everything they can to help her," Nina promised. "Did you see the people who were yelling?" Lily shook her head. "I didn't look. Grandma told me to hide." Just then, the radio crackled, and Nina heard an update. "Paramedics are bringing in an unconscious woman. Possible head injury. Signs of a struggle." "Your grandma's on her way, Lily," Nina said softly. "She's in good hands. The doctors are ready to take care of her." Lily nodded but cried harder. "I tried to wake her up, but she didn't wake up." Nina wrapped a blanket around Lily to comfort her. "I know it's scary, but you're not alone. I'll be right here with you." A few minutes later, the paramedics rushed in with a stretcher carrying Esther, Lily's grandma, who was still unconscious. Nina looked at Lily, who was frozen, staring at her grandma. "She's in good hands now," Nina said. "The doctors are working hard, but you've already done so much to help her." Lily didn't say anything. She just looked worried and sad. Nina stayed close, reassuring her as the doctors worked. The scene at Lily's house was very different. Detective Ryan Cooper arrived at the house where the break-in happened. The door was wide open, and everything was in chaos. The floor had broken glass, and furniture was knocked over. Blake noticed muddy footprints leading from the broken window to the back door. It looked like someone had come inside and caused a lot of trouble. Inside the house, Blake saw more mess. A china cabinet had been emptied, and there were papers scattered everywhere. On the table, there were some photos and old papers that seemed important. Blake picked up a bill for a property sale, which seemed like it wasn't just a regular robbery. Whoever broke in was looking for something special. Blake answered a call from Nina at the hospital. "Esther is still unconscious, but the little girl, Lily, is here. She's very scared. She said she heard men yelling at her grandma," Nina said. Blake asked, "Did she say what they were looking for?" Nina replied, "She said her grandma told her to hide under the table. She heard one of the men say, 'We don't have much time.'" Blake made some notes. "Keep Lily safe, Nina. I'll check out the house and figure out what happened." Blake then talked to a neighbor who said he saw two men running out of the house. They got into a fancy black SUV and drove off quickly. The neighbor also mentioned that one of the men was limping. Blake made notes of the information, and then he and his team went back into the house to look for more clues. They found broken pieces of a phone, and it looked like it was smashed on purpose. Esther might have tried to call for help before the men came. Back at the hospital, Lily sat with Nina in a quiet corner, holding a cup of cocoa. She didn't drink it and looked very worried. "Do you think Grandma will wake up soon?" she asked softly. Nina leaned in and said, "The doctors are doing everything they can. She's strong, Lily. Just like you. Lily nodded but looked worried. Grandma said bad people might come. She told me not to answer the door if she wasn't there. Nina's heart ached for the little girl. You're so brave, Lily. You've already helped your grandma a lot. The police will make sure no one hurts her again. Back at the police station, Detective Blake was sitting at his desk, thinking about what happened at Esther's house. He found something surprising. Esther had been a whistleblower in a big case against a man named Victor Crane, who had been stealing money from his business. Esther had told the police about it, and that made her a target. Someone had been looking for something in her house, probably something that could stop Calloway from getting in trouble. Blake looked up the name of one of the men involved. He found a match for a person named Caden Brooks, who had a bad record and worked for Calloway. This was no ordinary break-in. Someone was trying to stop Esther from helping the police. Blake quickly made a plan to find Caden Brooks and bring him in for questioning. One officer raised his hand. Any idea where he might be hiding? Rowe's last known address is an apartment in Eastwood, he asked. Blake replied, but he's likely on the move. Let's check his usual spots, bars, motels, anywhere he might be staying low. Start with Eastwood, then move outwards. Another officer asked, what about Calloway? Blake said, Calloway won't leave a clear trail, but if we pressure Brooks, he might talk. Let's go, Blake added. Detective Ryan Cooper gripped the steering wheel tightly, driving his unmarked car through the dark streets on the edge of town. His partner, Officer Eslaw Brooks, sat beside him, watching for signs of their suspect, Caden Brooks, who was Calloway's muscle. Their only lead was that Brooks was hiding in a rundown motel known for hiding criminals. Room 14, Morales said, checking her notes. Second floor, end of the row. Blake nodded and drove into the motel's gravel parking lot. The building was old, and the flickering neon vacancy sign made the night feel eerie. Some cars were parked in the lot, and one matched the car Brooks had been seen driving. Let's be quiet, Blake said as he got out of the car. If he runs, it's on us. Morales nodded and followed him as they walked toward the stairs. Backup officers spread out across the lot to cover all exits. As they neared room 14, Morales pulled out her gun, her eyes sharp. Blake knocked on the door, his voice calm but firm. Brooks, this is the police. We need to talk. There was silence. Then Blake heard movement inside. He's running, he muttered, stepping back as the door burst open. Brooks, a stocky man with a limp, rushed out of the room, pushing past Blake and Morales. His eyes were wide, and he was sweating. Stop, Morales shouted, chasing him as Brooks hurried down the stairs, limping on his injured leg. Blake followed closely, feeling his heart race. Brooks, you're making this worse, he yelled, but the man didn't stop. Brooks ran to the parking lot and headed for his car, but a patrol officer stepped in front of him, gun drawn. Don't move, the officer shouted. Brooks hesitated, his eyes bouncing between the officer and his car. Before he could decide, Morales tackled him from behind, pinning him to the ground. Stay down, she ordered, putting handcuffs on him as he struggled. Blake caught up, breathing heavily. Nice work, he said to Morales. Then he turned to Brooks. You've got a lot to explain. Brooks glared at him. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. We'll see, Blake replied coldly. Get him in the car. Back at the police station, Brooks sat in the interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the table. Blake and Morales watched from behind the two-way mirror Brooks as Brooks slouched in his chair, refusing to look at the officer questioning him. He won't crack, Morales said. Guys like him never do. He doesn't have to, Blake said. We've got his phone in the evidence room. Blake and the forensic team looked over Brooks's burner phone, which had been taken when he was arrested. Most of the messages were unclear, but one thread stood out. Need the documents, one message read. Safe is still a problem, read another. Blake felt his stomach twist. He's talking about Esther, he said. Whatever she has in the safe, Calloway thinks it can bring him down. Morales nodded grimly. If it's in a safe, it might still be at her house. Blake agreed. We need a search warrant, and we need it now. But Esther is still unconscious, and time is running out. If Calloway's men know about the safe, they'll be after it soon. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Nina Hayes sat with Lily in the quiet waiting room. Lily hadn't spoken much since they arrived. She held her doll tightly, as if it were the only thing that could help her. Are you feeling okay, Lily? Nina asked gently, kneeling beside her. Lily nodded but didn't look up. Her face was pale, and her eyes looked tired. Will Grandma be okay? She asked. Lily nodded again, but tears began to fall. Nina hugged her gently. You're so brave, Lily. Braver than most grown-ups I know. Lily relaxed a little, the comfort of Nina's hug helping her feel safer, but the fear she'd been through wasn't gone. Back at the precinct, Blake and Morales sat watching Brooks in the interrogation room, still silent. We have his phone and the messages about the safe, Morales said. If we link that to Esther's story in the embezzlement case, we've got motive. Blake stood straight, determined. Next, we find the safe before Calloway's men do. Detective Blake drove up to Esther Bennett's house, now empty and quiet. The once welcoming home was now damaged from a break-in. Blake stepped out of the car, feeling tense. His team had searched the house before, but something still didn't feel right. He felt the need to check again, especially after the cryptic messages from Brooks's phone. He slowly approached the front door, hand on his gun. The window that had been broken before was boarded up, and the door creaked as he opened it. Inside, everything was the same as before. Broken furniture, papers scattered, and glass everywhere. Blake's footsteps echoed as he walked toward the study, where a locked cabinet had caught his attention during the first search. It hadn't seemed important then, but now it did. As Blake stepped into the study, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Before he could answer, he heard a faint popping sound and smelled smoke. Danger hit him like a wave. He quickly turned around and ran for the door, the flames already licking the curtains in the living room, spreading quickly. Blake felt the heat, and smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. He grabbed his shirt and covered his nose. Through the smoke, he spotted a metal canister in the kitchen, a fuel can that someone had left behind. Blake bolted outside, coughing, as he called 911. This is Detective Blake. The house at 427 Willow Lane is on fire. Send help, he shouted. Fire trucks arrived quickly, spraying water on the flames with precision. Blake stood by, helpless, watching the house burn. When the fire was out, Blake walked carefully through the wreckage. The house was barely recognizable, its roof caved in and walls blackened with soot. The firefighters searched the debris to make sure there were no more hot spots. One firefighter called Blake over. We found something, he said. Blake followed him and saw a small safe, scorched but still intact. Looks like your arsonist missed something, the firefighter said. Blake nodded, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. Let's get it back to the precinct, he said. At the precinct, the safe was placed in the evidence room. Blake watched as a specialist worked to open it using tools. What do you think's inside? Morales asked. Something important enough to burn a house down for, Blake replied. The lock clicked open, and inside there were files, a flash drive, and a small notebook. Blake grabbed the notebook and opened it. The pages were filled with detailed financial records, written in Esther's neat handwriting. Jackpot, Morales said. Blake nodded. This isn't just evidence. It's a map of Calloway's crimes. Every illegal transaction, every secret account. It's all here. Is the flash drive important? Morales asked. Blake handed it over to the tech team. Let's analyze it now. Whatever's on there could bring Calloway down for good. The tech team worked fast, but Blake couldn't stop thinking about Esther, unconscious and at risk, the fire, and the messages from Brooks's phone. It all pointed to one thing. Calloway wasn't just protecting himself. He was sending a message. Blake stood by the evidence table, staring at the now empty safe. He had what he needed to go after Calloway, but at what cost? Esther had risked everything to expose the truth, and now, the people she loved were in danger. Blake's phone buzzed. It was Captain Rachel Harris. I heard about the attack. How's Esther? She's stable, Blake replied, looking at Esther's room. But this is getting dangerous. Calloway won't stop. What's the status on the evidence? Rachel Harris asked. The tech team is still decrypting the files, Blake said. Once we know everything, we'll have enough to bring Calloway down. Andrew's voice was urgent. We need to move faster. Blake glanced at the map on the wall. We will. We're planning the next move. Officer Eslop Brooks nodded, understanding what Blake meant. We'll make sure Calloway's men get the information, she said. Blake smiled. Exactly. They'll think it's their last chance to destroy the evidence. When they come for it, we'll be ready. They planned carefully to trick Calloway's men. They set up a convoy of cars with police officers hidden inside. The convoy drove all over the city, making it look real. They even gave fake information to make sure Calloway's people could follow them. At the end of the journey, they waited at an old warehouse. That night, Calloway's men arrived in black SUVs, driving carefully to avoid any trouble. Max Garrett, the boss's right-hand man, got out first. He told his team to check the evidence. But when they opened the box, it was empty. "It's a trap," one of the men shouted. Just then, bright floodlights turned on, and police officers surrounded them, telling them to drop their weapons. Max didn't want to give up. He tried to pull out his gun, but Officer Morales shot him in the shoulder before he could do anything. The officers quickly arrested him. Back at the police station, Detective Blake asked Max where Calloway was hiding. Max didn't want to talk at first, but Blake had enough proof to put him away for a long time. Finally, Max said, "He's probably at a safe house on the east side." Blake and his team went to the safe house. It looked normal, but the police were ready. They broke down the door, and Calloway's men were caught by surprise. Calloway was sitting behind a desk, looking scared but trying to act tough. Blake walked in and told him it was over. Calloway didn't believe it at first, but the police had everything they needed. They found more evidence in the safe house that showed Calloway was behind many bad things, including hurting people to keep them quiet. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Nurse Nina was taking care of Esther. Esther had been in a coma, but now she was awake. She asked about her granddaughter Lily, and Nina told her that Lily was doing fine. Detective Blake came to the hospital and told Esther that they had arrested Calloway. They had everything they needed to put him in jail, but Esther's story was very important. Blake asked if she would testify in court. Esther was nervous, but she agreed. She wanted to make sure Calloway couldn't hurt anyone else. At the trial, everyone was watching closely. Esther was nervous, but she told the truth about what happened. She explained how Calloway had tried to scare her and get rid of the evidence she had found. Even though the lawyer tried to make her look bad, she stayed calm. Detective Blake also testified, explaining how the police caught Calloway's men and gathered the evidence. Then, Calloway's enforcer, Caden, was brought in to testify. He told everyone that Calloway had given the orders to hurt people and destroy evidence. Caden wasn't trying to defend himself. He was just telling the truth. Calloway's lawyer tried to say that Caden was lying, but the jury didn't believe it. They listened to all the evidence, and in the end, Calloway was found guilty. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in prison. Calloway's men were also arrested, and some of them would spend many years in jail. Even though Caden helped the police, he still had to serve time for his bad actions. After all the trouble was over, Esther and Lily decided to move to a quiet town. Esther felt safe again, and Lily started making new friends. Detective Blake visited them before they moved and promised to stay in touch. Lily gave him a big hug and said goodbye. A few weeks later, Blake passed by their new house and saw Lily playing outside. He smiled and felt happy. Justice had been done, and the Whitmans were safe. Blake drove away, thinking that sometimes the little moments, like a child's laughter, were what really mattered. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest, inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.